Will AI replace doctors?
So AI will not replace doctors, but doctors who use AI would replace doctors who don't.
Alex, I am so excited for this. I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. I've been thinking with a couple of the AI shows. I can't wait to do this in person with Alex. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Harry.
Now, I would love to start with a little bit of context because we're 3 startups in at this point. So take me back. How did you first make your way into the world of startups?
So 22 years ago, I fell in love with a chatbot. Her name was Sibel. And really, I was, summer night in Paris in my basement, alone with my computer, and I found...
This could go in many directions.
Up to you. And I was mesmerized by this chatbot, the fact that the machine is trying to understand you, language, and can generate some words. And I was really, really struck by this thing, and I decided, I will spend my life building chatbots. And so I founded a company doing customer service bots 22 years ago, very early, called Virtuos. And this is how I started, this series of companies in the domain.
Can I ask you, given it was 22 years ago, and I know this is off schedule straight away, but just how do you think about market timing today?
Well, for 20 years, when we started, I thought chatbots would become very, very intelligent after 3-4 years and get to AGI and replace humans in call centers. And the more I worked on the problem, the more I realized it was really, really difficult to do that. Actually, the first time we released the bot in Europe was in 2004 to the French railway company. And we were very, very happy to have this customer, and the deputy CEO tried it, and she asked, "My name is wrong on the reservation." And our bot answered, "Hello, wrong on the reservation." And then we realized, okay, there is still a lot of work. It's not smart at all. And so the more I worked on these things, the more I realized it's not ready yet. And so suddenly, for the last year, 2 years, we reach a point where market timing might be finally good, where the product is ready and people have evolved to maybe 10 years after Siri, people have changed, and they are ready to meet this kind of technology. So maybe the market timing is now.
So if we project forward and thinking of market timing, how did Nabla come to be, and what was that founding moment?
So the founding moment of Nabla, I was sitting at a terrace at Facebook headquarters in Menlo Park. We joined Facebook through the acquisition of my second startup, always in the with.ai in this field. And sitting at this terrace with cocktails, looking at the sunset, suddenly it reminded me of a scene in Silicon Valley, the show?
Yeah, I love
where they go on the roof at Google, Huli, and there are these people doing barbecue and say, yeah, we are vest and rest. and I saw myself in this vest and rest situation, and after 4 years at Facebook, I suddenly realized, okay, it's time to go out and back to the arena. And we've learned so many things at Facebook AI Research. It's time to try to push these things to the real world.
Can I ask, what would you say are the biggest takeaways from your time at Facebook and at the AI Research kind of lab?
The first thing that amazed me when I arrived at Facebook is I thought all big companies were slow. And actually, when we arrived at Facebook in early 2015, there was maybe 6,000 employees, and it was going so fast. It was a machine, a very well-oiled machine. Engineering was so efficient, and I learned it's possible to be that big and very, very efficient. And when you are in this situation, there is nothing you cannot do. Just after I joined, I started to work on a project, and I wanted to hire 200 people to human concierge to train my bots in real time. It was not in the budget, of course. But a week after, I had a meeting with Mark, and in about 10 minutes, Zuck, challenged a little bit my idea, and he said, "Okay, let's do that." And I could hire 200 people in Menlo Park. And when you have this speed and agility and unlimited resources of a company like Facebook at the time, so I was really shocked by this at Facebook.
What did you learn from working with Mark? You mentioned that meeting there and the speed of decision making from him. Is there anything that you took away from working with him?
Many things. One thing I liked, he spent not a lot of time outside the company. He had 30 minutes meetings back to back from morning to the evening. and he prepared really well every meeting. So you have to send in advance like a short note about what decision you are expecting from him. If you fail to send this document 24 hours, by the minute before, your meeting get cancelled. And so in many cases, you arrive in front of him, he's read your document, he's gathered all the information, the data he needs. And so the meeting is very fast. He will challenge what you ask for maybe and make a decision. So this way to work, I'm trying, I think there is much to learn, but it's influenced me.
I totally get you. I love that in terms of structuring his thought process before the meeting.
I'll give you an example of that. When I wanted to hire my 200 human concierge, my reasoning was we will train this AI and it will work really well, and we will steal business from Google in terms of search, like exactly what ChatGPT may do in the time to come. And I prepared answers to every possible objection. He could object about everything. I was ready to say why my idea would work. And I arrive at the meeting, and first minute, he tells me, Alex, I agree with you, it will work. So instead of hiring 200 concierge, let's hire 100,000. And we will kill Google tomorrow. And then I completely reverse my course and say, no, Mark, I'm not sure it will work. It would be crazy to hire 100,000 people. And I gave all my reasoning on the opposite sense, like we should be careful, this thing might not work, and so on. So very smart of him. I don't know if it was on purpose, but I had to, he learned more about the truth of my project, attacking it from this direction, this angle, and it was very, very interesting.
That's such a good way to reverse your thinking. Can I ask, and we mentioned kind of Nabla being your third company, what worked with the prior ones that you've taken with you? What didn't work that you've left behind? And does it get easier?
It's not getting easier. You learn some lessons. You don't do the same mistakes again, hopefully, but you get new dangers, new issues. The one I suffered from when I started Nabla is what I call the Kim Jong-un, entourage trap. And the fact, you see this video of Kim Jong-un, and he's visiting something, and all the generals are around him with a notebook, and everything he say will be written down. If you fail to do that, I guess you disappear the next day. And nobody, of course, will ever say, I disagree with you or challenge any of these decisions. And starting my third company after 2 exits, I felt like my investors were always agreed, my team always agreed, people around us. And so I was not challenged enough. And we made some early mistakes that probably were not challenged enough.
What were some early mistakes?
So when we decided to start in healthcare, we were an engineering team, very strong in AI and engineering, but not so much in healthcare. And we made actually a good decision to start as a B2C healthcare company to learn. So we started a clinic. So I think this one was a good decision. It's an expensive decision. And we started this B2C virtual primary care clinic, and we learned everything like that. But then we lost our way a little bit, and in terms of product, of direction, we went too far before realizing that it was not the right path and that we should go back to a B2B business model. We probably took too much time to make these decisions. Just an example.
Can I ask you, what do you do then to stop the Kim Jong paradox or problem? How do you surround yourself then with people that do challenge you? What did you change?
So first with external, the solution first is with external people. Even my investors were too close to me, but if you go to people further away, they have less and who are very successful, and they have no incentive or to please you, and you get more information, more data from them. And internally, it's a matter of just telling your team, okay. You should challenge our decisions, and we did that a lot at Nabla, and sometimes too much. They challenge everything after that. Also, after you make 1 or 2 mistakes, the team will more naturally come forward, and this is before you reach the right level of challenge.
It's funny. One of my friends is Gustav Soderstrom, who's the CPO at Spotify, and he says talk is cheap. and so we should do more of it, which I like as a saying. We mentioned market timing. I want to start on kind of where we are in terms of, the landscape itself. And we look at the developments today, and I think ChatGPT has brought around kind of consumer excitement to a level that we haven't seen, obviously, in AI for years and years. Have there been fundamental developments in the last 18 months, technologically, that have led to where we are today with our excitement level? Or is it the continuation of years of behind-the-scenes development from amazing people like you?
So from the outside, for the general public, it looks like a very big step function with huge advancement every 10 years. I think from the inside, it's much more continuous. So for instance, ChatGPT, is based on GPT-4, which is based on GPT-3, was released 3 years ago. GPT-3 is a large language model. It was invented before that. Transformers, where the paper was released in 2016. And so the progress is continuous, I think, more or less. But the public perception of it is very, very discontinuous.
Can I ask you, what do you make of the VC hype cycle? Like now, everyone, I did an investment the other day, and it's in an enterprise SaaS company, nothing to do with AI. And I genuinely felt like a true contrarian inventor by not doing an AI deal. What do you and what do the teams around you and the kind of true AI OGs think when they see all the VCs just chasing everything AI?
Honestly, from our standpoint, it's really ridiculous. And I've been building AI companies for 22 years, so I've seen this cycle several times. So after a while, you're not surprised anymore. When I first raised money from my first startup in 2002 or 3, it was already there were 2 cycles before, and it was in an AI winter timing where in 2002, if you have AI in your deck, you will never raise anything because they lost money at the end of the 90s. And then 2005-6, you had to put back AI in your deck, and so on and so on. There was a huge bubble in 2012 when deep learning came out as better than other techniques. And then in 2016 with the chatbots when we joined Facebook.
I remember the chatbot bubble in 2016. That was big for 3 months.
So as an entrepreneur, the only thing you need to know is when to add or remove AI from your deck, and it will change about every 3 or 4 years.
I love that. Can I ask you, when I speak to investors, and obviously as an investor today, I'd probably say this, but the common criticism, especially of generative AI, is bluntly, it's a thin, relatively valueless layer on top of kind of foundational models that are open to everyone. Is that fair or not when we look at generative AI applications today?
I don't think it's fair. When the C language came out around 1972, some people said, hey, now it's so easy to build software, in C compared to assembly. Every software is just a thin layer on top of C. And of course, it's not true, and we know it. It's the same when databases came, in the early 80s. So I think it's really not fair to think that any AI application on top of LLM is just a thin layer. LLM is a new kind of resource. It's like a new kind of infrastructure that everybody can access, sure. But then it's completely novel. It's very hard to control. You have hallucinations. It's non-deterministic. It's very hard to configure. You have several knobs you can change, between fine-tuning or how you prompt it and many other. You can do reinforcement learning and so on. So it's very hard to control, and also it changes every week. You have new LLMs coming out that claims to be better than the ones from the week before. How do you decide when to change your LLM? How do you do it without breaking your existing users and product? So the rules, there is a new game, there is a new infrastructure, there is a new game, new rules. And the companies who are the faster to understand these rules and play along these rules will win and build the best products.
So if we have I'm trying to understand. So if me and you start a new startup today in the travel and expense management category, and we're using whatever model we choose to use, do you have an advantage over me if we're both using the same model?
I think I have, because I know how it works internally, so I know the limitations. When something is wrong, I know where I should poke, to find a solution. I also know when there are many and more LLMs available, which one will probably be the better suited to my problem. And I know what kind of machine learning I have to build around my LLM to balance for the weakness of it.
Sorry, just so I understand. So will we see companies switch between LLMs very frequently? Is that how it works? Sorry, I'm trying to understand.
It's how it will work, of course.
Yeah.
You have every 2 weeks incredible things coming out of research. And if you just assume it's a static, in a year from now, your product will be very dumb compared to your competitors' products. Or more expensive to run, or very slow.
We had Emad on the show from Stability, and he said, you mentioned hallucinations. He said hallucinations are a feature, not a bug. I didn't really get this.
I don't know what he meant.
Do you understand that?
I mean, by construction, the LLM has to output something, and so if there is nothing to say, it will build something. It'll make something up that looks natural. So this is probably what Emad meant. By design, he cannot not output something, and so this will be an hallucination.
And you also mentioned kind of the changing nature of LLMs and models. He said that no models today would be used in a year. Do you think that's right?
Absolutely agree with that. Will you drive the car you drive today in 10 years? I don't think so. And 10 years in car industry is like 1 week in machine learning gravity zone. And so there is so much progress so fast that I don't see why we would use the same in 1 year.
Got you. We mentioned your proprietary knowledge. If me and you were to start a startup in the same space at the same time, I clearly obviously agree with you in terms of winning and having an advantage over me. But so many investors are like, but it's all about the proprietary data that a company has that they can leverage on top of an existing model. How much of an advantage is it to have existing proprietary data, say being a 4 to 5-year-old company with 4 to 5 years of customer data, versus being a new startup with no existing proprietary data?
I think VCs are always one train late. So having a lot of proprietary data was very, very important for the last cycle. 5 years ago, maybe it's less and less true. You need some to bootstrap your model. So for instance, at Nabla, we built a data set of 30,000 medical consultations with patient consent. We have to pay doctors. It's very hard to build this because we need this to bootstrap our product. But then with the new pre-trained models, fine-tuning is very efficient with a little bit of data. There is I don't know if you've heard about Lima, a model that came out 3 weeks ago.
Can I actually just interrupt you and just ask, for those that don't know, and forgive me for the base questions, what's pre-trained and what's fine-tuning, just so people understand nomenclature?
So a large language model is trained in 2 phases. First phase is unsupervised pre-training, so it's just fed with huge amount of text, and it's trained to predict the next word, basically, the next token, the next word. And so this is what we call unsupervised pre-training. Unsupervised because you don't need any human intervention. The text by itself is enough because it will try to predict the next word, and on and on and on. And then the second phase is fine-tuning, is when you use different machine learning techniques. So for instance, reinforcement learning for ChatGPT, where you train your model to follow instructions. Like for ChatGPT, is when I ask a question, you should tell me something that looks like a right answer or looks like a reasonable answer to what looks like this question. And so the fine-tuning is the second phase where you give more precise instruction on how it should behave. Mm-hmm. And to do that, there are several techniques. And what recent papers, so everybody's still learning, it's like huge black boxes, these things, and everybody's still discovering new things. But 3 weeks ago, there was a paper about Lima. So this Lima paper shows that with only 1,000 question and answer examples, so very, very small data sets, they get something used for fine-tuning, so the second stage. They get something that performs better than GPT-3 and almost at the level of GPT-4 with only 1,000 QA, for fine-tuning. So the thing with LLM is it looks like a huge pre-training with text. It's learning mostly through pre-training with huge amount of text. And then with a small amount of data, with high-quality data, you can get a lot. You can get what you need and train your model to do what you expect with very small data sets.
Can I ask, how low does that go? You mentioned 1,000 Q&A there. Small. Like, does that get to 100? Or does there reach some asymptotic point where it's like, no, 1,000 is as small as it will go? I'm just intrigued.
It's very hard to answer. Probably depends on the domain you are teaching your model. Probably won't go less than 100 or something like that, because you still need to give information. You cannot compress information infinitely, and you still need to tell your model what you want, and so there is a limit somewhere. I don't know where.
Can I ask, and we mentioned models there, and we mentioned kind of size of models there, and actually how you only need actually very small amounts today. Will there be new foundational model companies created, do you think, or do you think we have the existing incumbents already?
So we probably have most of the existing companies. Maybe a few will be started. There is a lot of hype, and it's public, so I can spill the bean about Mistral, a new one created by 3 engineers, 2 of them from Facebook, and I know them. And you can still build this foundational model, but you need.
How can you? Sorry, I know them too, and they're fantastic. But how can you do it without being so far behind?
So to make a successful foundational model company, you need incredible scientists and a huge amount of money. And if you check these 2 boxes, I think you can still do it. And you need focus. I know Jan discussed that, and I totally agree what he said here, that Google and Meta could have done what OpenAI did, easily, and they didn't because it was not the priority, and there is all the legal people around. But I think a new startup with enough talent and enough money, and when I say enough money, I'm talking about billions, just to be clear, then I'm sure you can do at least as well as OpenAI.
Can I ask, we mentioned incumbents, we mentioned startups there kind of encroaching on incumbent space. I think the big thing that I think about is, like, bluntly, who wins in this next wave? Is it startups creating amazing new products, leveraging foundational models? Or is it actually Adobe? Is it actually Apple? Is it Google with Bard? How do we think about where value accrues to startup or incumbent with that wonderful movement?
So incumbents have a huge advantage through distribution. That's the one thing that is hard for us, startups. But incumbents have many disadvantages. I think first, they are very slow. And you mentioned Adobe. I was sure you would, because this is the one example that everybody has. But then who else was as fast as Adobe? So I think most of the incumbents won't move fast. And in many cases...
Do you not think they're moving faster? I mean, I don't know if you call Notion an incumbent, but like Notion have moved very fast. Adobe moved very fast. Navan, the travel expense management company now, is like solely on OpenAI. I think actually they have moved very fast. And do argue back with me, I know nothing.
No, that's fair. Some of them can move fast, and it's not fair to say they are slow and that's it. I think the incumbents suffer from problems because in many cases they will do AI enhanced features, and this is what all the one you mentioned did. The Notion, you still have a document, you edit, you have a cursor, you write, oh, by the way, you can call ChatGPT and to summarize a paragraph. It's what I call spreading a little bit of AI dust on the magic dust on your existing product. who knows how differently you can think about building knowledge for your company. Probably something will come and destroy Notion and Google Docs and all of them with a totally new paradigm that is made possible by AI. And certainly these incumbents won't do it. So I think the best incumbents can benefit from AI to be competitive, in their existing markets. But I don't think they will invent totally disruptive things that will kill them. And Kodak invented the digital camera, and of course they never released it because it would kill their main revenue, which was the films.
Do you think that's why Google didn't innovate in the way that they could have done? Because actually the cost per query, doing it, bluntly like ChatGPT does, is so much more expensive than the way that they do it today. And actually it would have cannibalized their whole business if they were like, hey, let's embrace this new cost structure, which is so much more expensive.
I think the reason is simpler than that. The reason is nobody could predict that LLMs would be so useful and powerful before you train one at this scale. And who in the Google org chart had the incentive to invest $500 million and just to see this without any business benefit for the company? If you add to that the legal department, who is not that happy that you are like releasing random chatbots who can say anything, then nothing happens. And this is what happened at Google and probably also at Meta, where nobody has the incentive to do that. And so OpenAI, as a private company, they need to show something, to build products, and they have this curiosity and the financial power, and they did it.
Can I ask, when we look at the different approaches, there's the open approach, there's the closed approach. We mentioned some of the biggest names there. You mentioned the Jan LeCun episode. He obviously is a big proponent for open. How do you think about which approach dominates over the next few years, open versus closed?
Open, obviously. LLM are AI in general is an infrastructure in the future, and like every infrastructure, I'm just paraphrasing Jan, but is open. Open wins always with infrastructure. So obviously, I think the foundational model that will win will be open. But that being said, we should be careful, because even an open model trained with open data, to me, is not that open, because when you have like 300 billion parameters and it's a huge black box, you don't understand why the output is what it is it really open? And so I'm just putting a little bit of salt on what I hear. And like open models are, you understand everything, it's explainable, it's predictable. It's not true. An open model can be as hard to predict that a closed model.
Is there anything that can be done to change that then? And is that a problem?
Sorry?
Is that a problem that it's as hard to predict as a closed model? Is it? Yeah.
It's a very big problem. And when I mentioned the limitations of LLMs and why, when you do a real world application and it still works in healthcare, you need to work a lot to circumvent these limitations.
Can I ask you, in terms of, we mentioned kind of data sets before, and I do just want to touch on it because I think it's important, and I am actually going back to Emad's episode, but he said about the importance of national data sets. And actually for certain things, I think it really is actually very clear that might be the way, whether it's neobanks, Western economies are very different to Eastern economies, healthcare. Consumer healthcare, if you have sunlight exposure, it's very different to if you have no sunlight exposure, or diets or whatever. Do you think we'll have national data sets moving forward, given how different nations have such different data?
I'm not sure about national data sets. I mean, if you want to sell something to a nation, it's good to say that, but I think like industry, per industry, per vertical data set, of course, will improve the quality of the model. So if you train an LLM only on medical data, like Google did with Palm, you get a better, with MedPalm, you get a better LLM for medical applications. But even you have to understand, I think not many people make the mistake, even if you feed a LLM with curated data, it's not guaranteed that the output will be will be good, will be perfect, that you can trust the output. So feeding an LLM with trusted data doesn't make the output trustable because of how LLM works. So there are lots of misconception about this.
Help me understand that then, because I think a lot of people will misunderstand that. So you have great, high-quality, trusted data. What leads to then high-quality output and good decision and outcome?
So an LLM is a huge probabilistic machine. It's like an autocomplete. I think this is the best image. And it will complete the beginning of your sentence at any cost. It will always complete it. And you may have like 10 facts, 10 sentences, let's say, in the input data set that are true. But maybe the LLM will start with the beginning of the first sentence and switch to the end of the another sentence just because it looks good. But logically, factually, this output will be totally wrong. And I simplified a lot, but this is exactly how it works. So you may have, and the form is perfect. It always sounds like a very good answer, but the reasoning, the facts may be totally off, invented, or wrong. And even if the input data set is wrong. So when people say, ChatGPT gave me a wrong output because it was trained on Reddit, and Reddit is a lot of noise. Yes, but only partially. Even if you remove Reddit from the training data set, it doesn't mean you won't have like random answers.
Yeah, no, I totally get you. Can I ask, we're kind of jumping around from Emad to Jan and picking different points, but Jan said in particular that it's a big jump to assume there's a correlation between intelligence and the desire to dominate. When we think about the most common question being the fear of AI really overcoming human power and dominating us, how do you think about Jan's statement about that correlation? Do you agree or disagree? And how do you think about that?
I fully agree with Jan, and not just because he was my boss at Meta, but I think if you really understand how machine learning works and you're not looking for free publicity, I don't see why you would say something like that getting more intelligent will make them want to kill humanity. I don't even understand the path leading to this thinking.
Can I be blunt? Why does someone like Geoff Hinton then feel that?
So I'm not in the head of Geoff. I don't know. I don't know. And I know Jan is also surprised. And yeah.
Do you think Elon Musk's decision to be very proactive in terms of the petition to pause AI development, how do you think about that?
I think it's very hard and dangerous to try to comment and understand what Elon Musk is saying in general. And it's weird because at the same time he said that, I know he's trying to build a team to compete with OpenAI. He hired somebody from DeepMind, like the same day where he announced we should pause for 6 months. And it looks to me that the people who are proponents of this pause or to more regulation are the ones who feel that they are in advance. And so it's like a way to say, guys, let us, we are in front. I don't want more people to start the race. Maybe I'm... I
love that. Can I ask you, you've been really in the space for decades, if you don't mind me slightly aging you. And there's a lot of people entering who are also very vocal. We were talking about it before. How do you feel about that? And I guess, how does it make you and the community around you feel who've been actually working and doing the hard yards for decades?
So on one hand, we are proud because we feel, okay, I was right before everybody else. I was talking about chatbots to my parents 23 years ago. and 22 years ago, they discovered ChatGPT and say, okay, we finally understood what you are trying to do, Alex. So on one hand, it feels good. On the other hand, it's sometimes frustrating because like everybody's jumping in and some people are really good at spinning narratives, talking stories, better than we are because we are engineers and it's not our culture. And like things about, you mentioned where the risk for humanity, things like that, we feel it takes a lot of time to debunk. And we feel that most people, not all of, some of them are very credible, of course, but mostly the people who defend this thesis are not
You mentioned creating chatbots 22 years ago and kind of the length to where we are today. I always think it takes longer to adopt than we think. Bluntly, when we look at where we are today, are we really at the precipice now? Or actually, is it another 10 years before we see that adoption cycle? I'm just intrigued.
I think finally it's here. When I see people using ChatGPT and learning to do their job differently with the help of ChatGPT, I really feel we are on the verge of finally having a huge impact with chatbots. For the first 10 years, I tried to convince people that chatbots were ready and to buy my chatbots. And they say, no, it's not. And then for the 10 following years, people told me, oh, chatbots are incredible. We can replace human with chatbots. And I said, no, don't do that. It's not ready. And finally, now I feel we are at a point where many things will be impacted by chatbots, which doesn't mean replacing people with them. You have to be. I think it's a great tool, but it doesn't mean it should, because of the chat form. It's tempting to think, okay, let's just replace this worker with a bot. In many cases, I don't think it's ready for that, but it will still have a huge impact of how work is done.
You said it's not ready to necessarily replace. When we think about Nabla and healthcare, I seem to be quoting him a lot, but Emad, with AI, you can change the nature of a doctor. Fantastic. Thank you, Emad. Will AI replace doctors?
So AI will not replace doctors, but doctors who use AI would replace doctors who don't. Definitely. AI is making can have a huge impact on doctors, the way they work, and those who will embrace this change will thrive.
Can I ask, in the next 1 to 2 years, how will those doctors who embrace it, how will they use it?
So the first thing I learned when I started to operate a healthcare company and a healthcare clinic, because we were a clinic initially, is that for the first 50 years of computerization, computers have been a bad news for doctors. Before computers, they see patients, they care, there is a little bit of admin work, but it's done by somebody else. So, medical secretaries, assistants, and not so much paperwork. And they're very, very, very happy. And suddenly, people like us come to them and say, okay, now there is an electronic patient record. You need to document. You need to fill this form. You need to do this and that. And we have trouble to get the money from the insurance company. So we need to document more to make sure the claims go through, and so on and so on and so on. So, the other day I visited a small clinic in Paris, and all the doctors looked very happy, and I said, what happened? It's not normal. Said, oh, the computer system is down today. So we are just using papers and pen. And they were so happy, all of them. And so you have to realize that the state today is a very bad state where computers were bad news for them. And because they are drowning, under this administrative work, documentation, for many reasons. Doctors spend on average 49% of their time doing this kind of administrative task, as opposed to caring for patients. Mm-hmm. It's bad for everyone. It's bad for them. 3 out of 4 doctors suffer from symptoms of burnout. It's bad for patients. And
3 out of 4 suffer from burnout.
3 out of 4 doctors have suffered from burnout symptoms in the last year. And the main reason of this is they all, mention the pressure of all this admin work, basically.
What is that admin work? I don't live this life.
So the biggest admin work they have to do is clinical documentation. So they have to document everything they hear, their decisions. And in big systems that we call EHR, electronic health records, which are like dinosaur systems. And the reason they need to do this documentation more and more is, first, it's a financial reason. To get reimbursed by the insurance companies, especially in the US, you need to have like a very solid file with all that. Otherwise, the insurance will take the first opportunity, the first pretext not to pay your claim. Mm-hmm. The second reason is for legal protection, because medical malpractice trials. It's so expensive. Your best protection is to document this in the right way. And so this is why mainly admin work started to grow bigger and bigger. And these EHRs are very, very old and clunky systems. I checked the other day, there was one specific clinical action that took 227 mouse clicks to be performed in the system. And I posted this on LinkedIn, and many doctors answered and said, no, actually it's more than 300 clicks. And so this is the state today.
So when we look at that though, the thing that strikes me there is like bluntly, okay, we could actually have recordings of meetings, transcript, speech to text, and then auto suggestions, meeting summary notes, whatever we want to do. The trouble is it's healthcare data. It's not me and you chatting about shopping where we could have preferences. No one really gives a shit actually so much about what you want to buy from a supermarket. With healthcare data, does regulation and consumer protections get in the way of efficiency?
Yeah, so first, the solution, I think how AI will impact doctors, it will bring an AI assistant to every doctor, to every clinician. This AI assistant will be aware of what's happening, what the patient is saying, what data we know about this patient, what documentation, what work needs to be done.
Sorry, just to break it down, how does it know what the patient's saying? We record meetings?
We don't record the meeting, but we capture the audio. We don't store it. We just capture it and then drop it.
Uh-huh.
And so, it gets a lot of context from the audio environment, what we call an ambient system.
Uh-huh. And then the data itself from the consumer, how do we do that? From wearables? How do we ingest the data?
So this AI assistant is connected to the EHR. So it will get the data from the existing source of truth, which is these patients' records.
Mm-hmm.
And based on these things...
Are the EHRs interoperable? Do they have the ability to move data between different applications and silos?
So in theory, there is a new law in the US, should be,
in theory,
that Epic spent billions to millions to try to block, but it finally was after I think 20 years of battle was passed, and so they should be interoperable. The new modern EHRs are like CRM systems today. They have an API, it's easy to integrate, and then you have the old ones who are trying to protect their customers. The only way they have to keep their customers is to put barriers so they cannot flee. And so for these, it may be harder to get to the data. What we do at Nabla, we use things like Chrome extensions to get the data from the browser. There is no API. We don't care. We get the data, and the doctors are happy. Patients are happy.
Can I ask? I worry with healthcare about the incentive mechanism, and what I mean by that is specifically, if we make people much more productive, and we maybe remove the need for certain nurses, actually more people will be unemployed. And when we think about politicians who are allocating money for the NHS, which is obviously our healthcare system, they need nurses' votes. And so saying, hey, we're going to remove a load of low-level nurses through intelligent automation workflows, whatever that is, it goes against the political incentives by being more efficient. Does that become a problem?
It's not a problem because so the World Health Organization says that we are missing 18 million clinicians by 2030. So the state is not that it will put people out of the jobs. The reality is we are desperately looking for clinicians in every country in the world. So if you can make their lives easier, it's a big win for everyone.
Yeah, the demand and the supply chart is way out of whack.
Exactly.
Totally. What are the biggest barriers then to AI having the impact on healthcare that I think we both believe it can?
There are many barriers. I think the mistake that many AI startups are doing in healthcare, and what we did initially at Nabla too, is we focus directly on the patient. And of course, in your ideal way to see the things you want to say, let's do a B2C product, patient, we forget the doctor in the loop. And you have this movie-induced vision where a patient is in front of a robotic doctor and everything is so smooth and imaging, automated, data-driven. And it's tempting to jump straight to this vision. And you can convince VCs to give you money to do that because it makes like a cool slide deck. But the reality is it's too much too fast. You cannot jump. There are the healthcare system is so complicated. You cannot regulation. For many reasons you cannot do that. Technically, we're not ready to do it. We don't have the data, and so I think we should first focus on clinicians, the way things are done today. Change your life with AI, turn them into AI fan base, and then together we'll go to the next step. And I think to answer your question, that one of the main problem is that we are trying to go too fast to a patient-facing perfect system. When you ask doctors, so at the beginning of Nabla, I'm spending a lot of time with in hospitals, I'm spending nights in the emergency services call center in Paris, listening to everyone.
How is that? Like, what do you see?
So it's interesting. I met a doctor in a cafe in Paris. I made a demo of Nabla on my phone, and he told me, Alex, you're going to come to the emergency services call center next week, all night with me. It turns out this guy is like the chief emergency physician in France, Patrick Pelou, invited me to spend nights over there. And he captured very quickly how we could change his life and the life of his team and the life of people. And so what I learned spending nights over there is it's a little bit like a call center. You have a first team is taking calls. So overall in France, it's about 40 million calls a year. And the first responder, they don't make medical decisions. They are not doctors. They're not even nurses. Their goal is to understand what is the address and what is the situation, what is the emergency. It's very hard to get that because people are panicked and you have lots of people calling for very small things, ridiculous things, and you have real emergencies hidden so their job is to sort through these very, very complicated situations when people are calling. And they actually write a structured note with this information. They click submit, and then you have like regulation doctors who make the decision: should we send the real emergency services? Should we send the firefighters, or should we just have a doctor talk to this person over the line? And so it's a two-step decision, and a lot is done around documenting the situation. And these things, it would be so easy to do with what we do at Nabla and what we know how to do with AI today. The goal would be to keep, of course, the person who is answering the phone, because they are know-how in terms of empathy, calming people down, understanding the context. Very complicated situation again. Yeah. Typically, you have several people that are screaming. Nobody knows how many victims, what's happening. A lot of with mental health problems. So it's very, very complicated situations. And these people, I spent hours and hours listening with a headphone next to them. They are experts at cutting through this darkness and understanding what's happening. So we want to keep these people, but they are typing with two fingers on the keyboard and missing some information. It takes a lot of time to get, and so on. So having an AI assistant work alongside them, listening to the call and documenting, I tried it. It works already perfectly with what we have. Would be a perfect team. So this is an example.
And it actually means they can be a lot more empathetic and not worried about typing and getting everything down and being here in the moment with you to understand your problem.
Exactly, and it would be faster too. So it's a win-win. It would be like maybe 20 seconds instead of 1 minute, and with more empathy.
How many of the calls lead to ambulances sent out? Do you have that number? Is it like 1 in 10, 1 in 20?
I'd say it's 1 in 5. I'm giving you like what I saw. Yeah. It's not an official. What I saw the few nights, maybe 1 in 5 results in services being sent. In these cases, 3 in 4 are firefighters who have medical, doctors and so on, but they don't handle the most critical medical urgencies. Are handled by what we call SAMU in France, and it's 1 in 4.
How receptive are doctors to you when you talk about AI and improving their work with AI? Are they like, yes, bring it on, or like, seen it before?
So we've seen a change in that in the recent years. And up to 3 years ago, almost every doctor would tell me, okay, you don't understand our problems, go away. I'm already fighting against my EHR every day. I don't need more stuff. It really changed recently. The core reason has nothing to do with AI, is that the health systems are collapsing everywhere. I know the situation with NHS. Here, it's worse in France. In the US, all the major hospital groups are losing money.
Why is it worse in France? Losing money? Worse treatment? What's happening?
So in France, we have a shortage, huge shortage of doctors. And there are like zones in France where you have to drive 200 kilometers and wait for 3 weeks just to see a GP. So this is obviously a big problem. So the access, globally, the problem is the same everywhere. It's access to healthcare. In France, you can get good doctor quickly if you know somebody in the system. In the US, you can get it if you have a lot of money. So it looks different, but eventually it's a problem of not enough doctors.
Don't laugh. Are there less doctors than ever, or are we getting more unhealthy than ever? Is the need increasing? Is the demand increasing, or is the supply decreasing?
Both. So there was some lobby like 20 years ago to have less doctors, because they would. I won't go into there. But since it takes 10 to 15 years to train doctors, decisions you've made 20 years ago have a big impact today. So first, there are less and less doctors, and many of them are aging and will be retired soon, and so the number is going to drop. And in terms of demand, everywhere in the world, you have a huge rise of chronic disease like diabetes that takes a lot of medical resources. Chronic disease, we always see as engineers, young, healthy people, we see the the easy things with medicine where, I'm hurt, there is a quick diagnostic decision, I have a prescription, maybe I spend 2 days in the hospital and then it's over. But what takes resources in the healthcare systems is not that, is our aging people and chronic disease, and often combined.
I actually had a fascinating stat. It was like 90% of the cost of healthcare is spent on the last 6 months of life, something like that, which was astonishing to me. Can I ask you, which is like, you deliver great value to doctors, to frontline workers. They don't control the budgets. My first ever investment, fun fact, was like a WhatsApp for doctors and nurses in the UK. They got to 100,000 doctors and nurses in the NHS, and then it came to getting paid. And
is it Acurx?
I mean, it was Pando, which was the competitor to Acurx. And they just don't pay. I mean, it's shit. And they would deliver great value, 100,000 doctors and nurses. How do you think about actually building a business beyond delivering value in a sector that just doesn't pay and doesn't have a willingness to pay?
So this is the biggest difficulty when you are trying to disrupt healthcare, actually, especially for a startup.
Yeah.
You have the payer, insurance or public payer. You have the providers who are providing care, and you have the patients. And it's a very complex relationship with three parties. And typically, the one who benefits from a product is not the one who is paying for it. So typically, the patient will benefit, for instance, from your better healthcare app, but it has to be paid by the payer, by the NHS. And if the provider disagrees, they can block everything. So you have to solve this three mass problem from the day one, which is very, very, very complex. And so you have to find a balance between, if you optimize as a startup, if you optimize a very small process, it's easy to deploy because it follows the lines of the existing system. So for instance, if you do a better way to take appointments, you make online appointments instead of calling, you don't change the healthcare system with that. And it's easier to push. Even that is hard to push, but it's easier because you don't change the fact that there is an appointment, there is a consultation, there is a synchronous visit, so you fit into the system. If you do something too ambitious, it will never fit in the existing system. I think it's impossible to go to market with something too ambitious. So I think as startups, we have to find the right level of ambition where it fits enough in the system to be adopted, but it's not too much disruptive from day one. Otherwise, it's impossible to go to market. This is a balance we have to find every day.
Yeah. And who pays you?
So learn very hard lessons. So if you are thinking about creating a healthcare startup, the very, very first question I want to hear is, who is paying for the product? Who is paying? What is the business model? Then you can, in a startup, in YC, in all startup schools in the world, they tell you, don't start with a solution, start with a problem. But in healthcare, even starting with a problem is not enough. Start with who is paying, and then how you do frame the problem for this person to pay, and then what is the solution for this problem eventually. And in our case, at Nabla, we have this vision of an AI assistant, and it took us some time to find out who will pay and how for this thing.
If we think about this responder to the call, though, and we take intelligent notes which allow them to be better and more empathetic, who's going to pay for that? The hospitals don't pay. So,
in the emergency services?
Yeah.
So in emergency services, the only potential payer is a government. And so not a good go-to-market,
Yeah.
Disastrous go-to-market. So, and that's why I didn't start with that. Now, we've deployed our product in the US. Thousands of doctors are using it every day. We are well-funded. Now, if the emergency services in France really want my product, and the sponsor is Patrick Pelou, which is like the god of emergency in France, and the Minister of Health look at me in the eyes and say, we really want it, it may be the right timing. But it would be a very, very bad idea to start with that as a startup. And maybe if you're lucky, you do a pilot, and then you wait, and it's what I call death by pilot.
And so you go to the US and you sell to private clinics?
We started with the US because the problem we are solving now of clinical documentation is huge in the US, bigger than in Europe. And so the willingness to pay for the existing providers, and again, you need an entry point in the system is very high. And so we found this go-to-market. We also made it possible for physicians to use our product without any approval from anyone. It's like almost a B2C go-to-market, bottom-up. They can go to nabla.com. It's a web application. It's a Chrome extension. They use it tomorrow, and then they love it, and then they will recommend, talk to their boss and say, we'd like to use this in the full clinic.
Can I ask, you mentioned going to the US there because of the bigger market. I think there's a common suggestion to a lot of AI founders today that if you want to build an AI, you got to be in the Valley. It's all about being in San Francisco. It's where the talent is. Paris and France has become also an AI hotspot. How do you advise founders first on whether they need to be in the Valley or not to be building the best in AI?
I think it used to be true, but it's not true anymore. When I built my second company with .ai, I happened to stumble upon Adam Scheyer, the creator of Siri, on a parking lot in the Valley after an event, and he became friend. He helped me a lot to think about with.ai. He gave me the confidence to follow what I had in mind. And owing to this confidence, I was able to refuse offers from, Google and others who wanted to buy us too early. And so it had a huge impact of this on my company. If I were in Paris, no Adam Scheyer, nobody has done this before, maybe I would have sold it to the first, 10 million, let's sell it, it's good. And so it used to be true, I think, that you needed to be in the Valley with having these kind of people around you. Now I think it's less true because everything is distributed. The talent is very, very distributed. It will get more distributed. And I think you should get close to your customers.
Do you think French startups still sell too soon?
Still what, sorry?
Sell too soon.
Yes, French startups. So in France, we are really good in, we have really good AI engineers, machine learning engineers, because the education system is free, is very focused on mathematics. So we produce lots of good engineers, but we suck at growing companies. Really, we are not bad at that. I don't know why. Maybe we lack discipline. Maybe we...
Is it you suck at growing companies, or you just sell too soon? Like the offer comes in and actually 50 million, it's a lot of money. You've only raised one round. You'll take home 10, 15 each as co-founders. C'est bon?
Exactly, c'est bon, it's enough. And so I think it's hard to... If you are normal, it's hard to refuse a $1 billion offer if you haven't done 10 million before.
Yeah.
But this is what Zuck did, what Google founders, Sergey and Larry did. So maybe we're not focused enough or disciplined enough to, and we don't have examples around us to grow this company. Hopefully it's changing. We have very, very good scale-ups in France now, but it takes some time to...
What do you think Europe needs to do to keep pace with the US in terms of AI and being an ecosystem that attracts the best AI talent?
So Europe is probably 10 years late compared to US and China, and with a new regulation, we are probably going to take 50 years more.
Talk to me about that. Why do you think that is? Because the regulation is so prohibitive? Unpack that for me.
So the new regulation is a disaster. If you look at it, there is no way. People who wrote this, I don't understand really. They went too fast. Good regulation is about good timing and involving the right people who are actually doing stuff in this domain. I think Europe being late felt like, okay, let's be at least first in regulation.
What was it about the regulation which made us so bad?
So the regulation, some aspects say, for instance, that you should kind of be accountable. I'm simplifying, but you should be accountable of all the data you use to train your model. For instance, you should make sure that you have a proper license, like explicit consent from everywhere it comes from, and which I see why it's a beautiful idea. Who would disagree with that? But in practice, it means that 100% of the LMs that were trained these last 3 years would be illegal in Europe. And so I think it's it's not connected to the reality. The intent is good, but the limits it puts on how to train a model and how to operate a model makes it in practice, compared to what we do today, makes everything illegal.
Does it mean that so it makes everything illegal, as you said? What do European startups do then?
We move to the UK. Maybe for one reason, Brexit.
Move to the UK.
Yeah, finally, Brexit maybe was good. I'm half joking. If the regulation, it's not final yet, but if it's really like this and nobody can challenge it, startups like us may have to move. Or maybe we can keep the team in France, but we have to physically train the models elsewhere. I don't know, but it's totally it's a big, huge danger.
What would you do if you were in charge? If I put you in The Hague or in the EU and you were given the regulatory powers over the next 5 years of AI in Europe, what would you do?
First, I wait a bit because it's too early. We are still in a demo phase of AI. LLMs, it's not really used a lot. It's just beginning to be used. And as I said, regulation timing is key. You shouldn't be too late. But if you're too early and nobody knows what are the risks that are actually what actually are the risks? Not the risk you think because you read some science fiction books, but the real risk nobody knows yet. And so I think first I would wait maybe a year or two to learn from the field what should be regulated and why. And then I would involve people who build these models, of course, but also people who are using it, the users, the general public, which was not done so far. So they have experts who are smart people, but there is no reality of LLMs yet. So if you regulate too early, it cannot be good.
Can I ask, do you feel a bit sorry for them? Because there's never been such a large chasm between government's knowledge and then the private sector's knowledge. Are government adequately placed to instill regulation on AI?
Which government?
Well, I mean, any, because bluntly, scientists, researchers are not in government. And so you have a load of bureaucrats and politicians saying, oh, we need you to be accountable for all of your models. Do they know what a model is?
I think some people know what a model is. They talk to some smart people, but...
have you spoken to many politicians?
Not enough, probably.
But Joe, so you kind of have to say AI is this. That's where we're at.
Yeah, I love to spend more time, to take them to the field and show them how it works and the benefits and the real risk. Because I'm not saying there is no need for regulation or no risk, but yes, there is a huge disconnection.
What do you think about China? We spoke about Europe there. China, how do you think they've embraced AI and the next wave of AI?
So China, they have a key advantage that there is no GDPR or very few regulation internally, and so the data quality they have and the amounts, both the quality and quantity of data is incredible in China. And so, for instance, for healthcare data, they probably have everything about every individual in China. And if you have if you are supported by the government, I'm sure you have access for research to all this. So they have this. They are lucky for that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Okay, if there's anywhere that, bluntly, if you think about geographies, who's the winner and who's the loser in the next 10 years? China, US, Europe.
Well, they all have issues. There are issues. So we talked about the advantages of China, but they are very close. They are getting more and more close. They have maybe the wrong incentives at the research level. So it's hard to predict what will come out of China. We talked about Europe, where regulation is probably the biggest problem that will keep Europe behind. And we are already behind. That's my concern. The US, is like always in a very good position. Immigration laws may be something that will be a problem eventually in the US because talent is so distributed. With the new, you can learn deep learning very easily from everywhere in the world on a tablet today, and it will be more and more like this. And so if it's so hard to go to the US to work for a US company, and eventually it will have an impact, I think.
Yeah. And then the US, what's the biggest downside of the US?
So immigration laws,
yeah,
I think are the biggest downside of the US.
I want to move to a quick fire round. I've peppered you already. I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts. Does that sound okay?
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with, what do others not know that you know to be true?
That we live in a simulation.
Unpack that for me.
I cannot compromise my sources.
Do you agree that some of the biggest businesses to be built in AI will be built in services businesses helping enterprises implement AI?
I disagree.
Huh.
I think AI will enable a new generation of players in every industry that will kill the incumbents eventually.
What do you think is that timescale?
5 years.
5 years?
And I mean, existing services companies, like consulting companies, are embracing AI. They will eventually remove the big data from their website and put AI, and then they will put LLM to replace the words, and they will take this business. I think there was a company called Element AI a few years ago in Canada, very ambitious company who tried to do services like that, and they eventually failed. They were acquired by ServiceNow for the amount they raised.
What's the biggest element you'd like to change about the AI community?
Make it more diverse. I'm really tired of talking to people just like me, and we would. It's a cliche to say that, but it's actually we would. It would be a lot of value if we get more diverse. I have I can just tell a quick anecdote. When I was at Facebook, somebody discovered that the model that was supposed to tag images that was 100% successful to finding tennis balls in pictures. Actually, if you remove the tennis ball from the picture, it was still finding the tennis ball. So it didn't learn to find the tennis ball. It learned the context of a tennis ball, like a racket. And then in the second phase, he changed the color of the people on the picture, and if you had more black pixels in the hair, suddenly the model thinks, oh, it's a ping pong ball. And so it was a very early days when we discovered that some models have bias. And this bias in this case is it didn't learn to look at the ball, it learned to look at the race of the people around. And it's actually making this decision tennis versus ping pong based on the race of the people around.
Emad said all models have bias. Is that fair?
Yeah, it's more or less, but all of them. And many models have huge bias. And the guy, very strong researcher who found this thing at Facebook very, very early before everybody talked about bias, is Mostaque Cissé. He's from Senegal. I don't think it's just luck, that somebody with a different angle than we have, different culture, found that's a huge hole in the model that we hadn't found before.
Does AI kill traditional media?
I don't think AI will kill investigative, journalism, finding the right sources, the right information. So this part of media, I don't think will be replaced by AI. Now the generation part at the output probably will be disrupted a lot by AI.
Yeah. Okay, tell me, what's the most painful lesson you've learned that you're also pleased to have learned?
That fundamentally people don't really change.
Huh. What makes you say that?
I think you can help people to grow, it's true for yourself, so you can correct some weaknesses, you can be stronger at what you are strong at already, but I think you have to accept that some of the fundamental characteristics of yourself and the people around you won't change, and if you expect them to change, it leads to big failure and mistakes.
What do you think is the biggest misconception that people have around AI? You hear many discussions. What do you think is like, oh, can't believe they're saying this again?
It's that they think it's conscious, and they are influenced by the form, like, oh, perfect answer, perfect form, and it's a chatbot. It answered my question, and influenced by the form, they make conclusion on the deep inside, of the system and say, oh, it's conscious. And for me, the biggest proof of that is that in 1966, when the mother of all chatbots was released at the MIT, ELIZA, the very first bot, people, for a few months, people around the world thought that AI was solved, that there was a human, sentient AI in ELIZA, which is a very, very simple pattern matching system with regular expressions. But because of this, the way it was presented, people fell in the trap, and I think we keep falling in this trap again and again and again for 60 years.
Who's been the most helpful angel?
Probably Yann Lequin, who invested in in Nabla, especially when we doubt about something, or he's very confident that we are on the right path, and it means a lot.
What makes the best VC? Like, help me. I'm an investor. You're a founder. What can I do to be the best investor for you, honestly?
I think it depends a lot on the founder in front of you and the stage of the founder,
What do you want?
So, personally, I worked with Andreessen Horowitz with my previous startup. It was incredible because they never call, they never ask for anything. We didn't even have board meetings. And every time I need something, in 20 minutes, I get huge help. Maybe it's to find a real estate problem because I don't have an office. Maybe it's organizing a huge event and I don't want to hire a marketing team. I want to use them for 1 week. Or I have a strategic decision to make, and they give me access to the best people in less than a day. And so the fact that you are in control and you ask for help and they deliver it we could grow with that AI to a very nice company with only 13 employees because we are relying on Andreessen Horowitz for all these things, and it was incredible. But for my first startups, I did some strategic mistakes, go-to-market mistakes, and then I wish my VCs back then would have been more involved with me and coach me. And so it really depends on the founder stage, I think, and you should ask.
Do you think VC in Europe is good, or do you think it's still massively behind? You've seen the US.
again, it changed a lot. I think 10 years ago, VCs in Europe were all from the financial industry. There is nothing about finance in being a VC. A little bit, of course, but it's mostly about entrepreneurship. And so 10 years ago, all the VCs I was working with in the US were former entrepreneurs, and all the VCs I knew in Europe were former bankers. And you don't need a banker. In most situations, you don't need your VC to be a banker, but you need them to be an ex-entrepreneur.
Yeah, no, I get you totally. 10 years' time, where's healthcare?
Hopefully 10 years' time, every physician has their AI assistant doing a lot of stuff for them and helping them to be 10 times more efficient, seeing more patients, spending more time with every patient, making better decisions. I also think that at the higher level, decisions that require a big picture of the data, large view, will be taken by AI, not by people. So, for instance, in a emergency services regulation center, when you have thousands of people needing help and you have some resources, what is the state of your resources? What is the demand? How you make these decisions at the city scale? Today is done by humans, but it's a miracle that it doesn't collapse. And sometimes it's collapsed when it's a big, event. And so these kind of decisions, I think, will eventually be taken by AI.
2033. Where are you then? Where's Alex then?
So my dream is to build a healthcare system from scratch, without any of all these limitations and constraints we mentioned. So controlling full stack, patient experience, provider, hospital, data-driven prevention. So my dream is to be able to build that. And to do that, I still need to learn a lot in healthcare, and I need a few $1 billion.
Alex, listen, I've loved doing this. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for putting up with my prying questions.
Thanks, Harry.
You are a star, my friend.